Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome back to another movie review. As you can tell by the title of today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the 2006 Halloween-themed animated kids movie, Monster House, released in 2006. And this is personally one of my favorite Halloween movies to watch in the October season, in all honesty. And it's not just because of nostalgia. I still think, I honestly think that even if I had gone my whole life without watching it until recently, I would still really like the movie. And as a point of reference, this was the very first movie to take place on Halloween that I have memory of watching. And I think I was around 4 years old when I watched this, so that would have been back in 2007. But yeah, I've been a big fan of this movie ever since then, and so yeah. So the plot of this movie is as follows. The plot of the movie is as follows. No adults believe three youths, DJ, Chowder, and Jenny's assertion that a neighboring residence is a living creature that means them harm. With Halloween approaching, the trio must find a way to destroy the structure before innocent trick-or-treaters meet ghastly ends. So that's basically the plot synopsis to Monster House. So, in other words, it's a movie about a house that's a literal monster. That means people harm, so they got to destroy it. And I will say, this movie does have a rather good cast. You got Mitchell Musso voicing DJ. You got Sam Lerner voicing Chowder. You got Spencer Lockey voicing Jenny. You got Fred Willard voicing the dad. You got Catherine O'Hara. Yup, that's right. The red hair actress who played Kevin McAllister's mom in Home Alone voicing the mom in this movie. You got Steve Buscemi as Mr. Nevercracker. You got Kathleen Turner as Constantine of Constance. You got Maggie Gyllenhaal as Z, Nick Cannon as Officer Lister, Kevin James as Officer Landers, Jason Lee as Bones, and John Herder as Renegade Skolinski or Skull. So yeah, really stacked cast overall. So anyways, how was this movie received when it came out? Well, when Monster House was released worldwide in the US on July 21st, 2006, it received positive reviews from critics and audiences and was a pretty big box office hit, making $142 million worldwide on a $75 million budget. Now, as for my reaction to the film, yes, I absolutely love this film. So without further ado, let's get into my review. And if you guys have not seen this movie, there will be spoilers. But come on, who hasn't seen this movie by now? But without further ado, let's get into my review. So the movie starts off where the movie takes place in the 1980s, where there's a little girl who was basically riding a bike outside in the October season, and she's basically singing, riding on her tricycle, saying hello sky and stuff like that. But then eventually the girl, she's driving her tricycle, but she accidentally falls in this old man's backyard, and the old man is Mr. Nevercracker, who's actually voiced by Steve Buscemi. And so the girl, she falls in the garden with the tricycle. She's trying to get it out. And then we hear like the wind blowing, and then the camera cuts to like the dark door of the house, and we see the eyes of like the owner, but then he steps out, and then the old man, Mr. Nevercracker, yells, "Get off my lawn," and stuff like that, making the girl scream and freak out. And he's like, "Do you want to be eaten alive?" She was like, "No." And he's like, "Well, then get out of here." And then Mr. Nevercracker, like, destroys her tricycle and rips it apart in front of her. And then she starts crying and running away. And Mr. Nevercracker's like, "Stay out of my house," and stuff like that. And then not long after that, before Mr. Nevercracker is about to walk back in his house, we hear a camera flash in the background, and we see that the main character of the movie, DJ, voiced by Mitchell Musso, is basically spying on the neighbor through the telescope, and then his parents are yelling down to him downstairs. They're yelling DJ, and then DJ writes a note on a notepad saying he took another tricycle, and then DJ says, "I'm coming," and stuff like that. And then he goes downstairs, and then he says to his mom, he says, "But Mom, there's something wrong with the house. I'm serious." But like he has a voice crack and his mom's like, "What is that?" "I'm serious." And then she's like, "His voice sounds funny." And then the dad says, "Something's happening. Someone's going through puberty. What's happening to my body? Am I right?" And stuff like that. But then, not too long before his parents leave, DJ's dad and mom are about to drive the car out of the, they're about to drive the car backwards out their driveway, and they said, "See you tomorrow night." But then basically what happens is that Chowder, his friend, like he's wearing like a mask over his face, but like there's no eye hole, so he can't see, and then he runs into the back of the car and falls over. And you know, the mom, voiced by Catherine O'Hara, says, "What was that?" And then the dad says, "It would be nice if you were just not under the car, would you?" And then Chowder says, "Sorry about that. It's kind of hard to see with the mask." And then the dad says, "Well, then why don't you take it off, Chowder?" And then the two parents leave and stuff like that. But then Chowder tells his friend DJ, "Cheer up, it's almost Halloween, and you know we're gonna go trick or treating." And then DJ's like, he says, "I'm not going trick-or-treating this year." And Chowder's like, "What?" He's like, "Come on, you're going to break a 6-year streak." And then DJ's like, "Maybe I'm getting a little too grown up." And while they're having this conversation, Chowder's playing with his little basketball. And then Chowder's like, 2 seconds on the clock. "It's time to be in your face disgrace." And then Chowder takes the baseball and but yes, Chowder, he takes the basketball, he tries to chuck it because DJ has like a basketball hoop that you know in his by his driveway, and then Chowder, you know, he chucks the basketball and he accidentally bumps himself in the nose, and he was like, "My nose is in my brain." And then DJ's like, "Oh my gosh, let me see, what? You're a dork." And then he says that to Chowder, but then Chowder and DJ, they basically see that the basketball has landed on Mr. Nevercracker's lawn. And anytime an item, you know, whether it would be a basketball, a tricycle, or whatever, but if anyone's property falls on his lawn, Mr. Nevercracker always takes it and tries to scare the people off his lawn. And there's a reason for that, which we'll get to, but then, you know, but then there's a part where DJ and Chowder basically wants DJ to go get his basketball, and it's going good at first until, you know, it's going all fine and dandy until Mr. Nevercracker comes out of the house and stuff like that, and then he yells at DJ, "You!" And then DJ's like, "No." And then Mr. Nevercracker is chasing DJ. He tries to like swipe at him, but he misses. And DJ accidentally kicks some of the grass off the ground. And then Mr. Nevercracker's like, "What have you done?" And he's like, No, I'm sorry." And he's like, "You are dead." And then I like the part when Mr. Nevercracker picks up DJ and he says, "Do you want to be a dead person?" And DJ's like, "No, I love life." He says, "Then stay out of my property. Then stay out of my house." And then he is like, "I got that for now on. This is my house. Why can't you respect that? Why can't you stay away from my..." But before he can finish his sentence, Mr. Nevercracker feels a pain in his chest, and then, well, he has a heart attack, so an ambulance comes to his rescue. And early on in the movie, while this is happening, there's like basically an ambulance rushed out, and they basically have Mr. Nevercracker on like an ambulance bed. You know, the beds with the wheels. You've seen them before in movies, but they're basically trying to wheel him on it, but one of the wheels gets caught in the grass, but then they're able to pull it, but the grass literally pulls. Now DJ, Chowder, and the paramedics, they do not see it, but some of the pieces of grass pull one of the wheels off it, and then they put Mr. Nevercracker in the ambulance, and, you know, the ambulance drives away to take him to the ER and stuff like that. But then, not long after that, Chowder ends up leaving because Z, which is DJ's babysitter, shows up, and, you know, she is like, "All right, you know the usual rules. Got to be indoors by 9, night lights out at 11, and I control the stereo, the radio, the telephone, all of that. And this movie does take place in the 1980s, by the way, and one thing I think the director, Gil Kenan, did a good job nailing with this movie, I think he does a good job nailing the 1980s aesthetic. Like, you definitely bought the fact that this was a movie that took place in that time. But anyways, getting to Z, the babysitter, like, she can be funny, you know, like, so there's a part when DJ meets her, and Z, like, she tells her all these rules, and then DJ's like, oh, I'm practically an adult. I don't even need you here, Elizabeth. And then Elizabeth decides to pick up a plant vase, and she drops it on the ground. She's like, gosh, DJ, why'd you do that? And DJ's like, but I didn't. And Z says, yeah, well, who are the parents going to believe? Go up to your room. And then DJ's like, fine. And then she blasts up the stereo, and then DJ goes to bed early. And another thing I will say about this movie, for an animated movie, it's rather well directed. Like, for instance, not too long after DJ goes up to his room when Z told him to go up in his room, when he's sleeping, the movie cuts to later at nighttime, and there's a scene where the entire room, like, where all the lights in the room are red, and, like, we see a shadow of the house, but, like, we see the shadow silhouette of, like, a giant arm and a hand in his room, which basically goes on top of him like this, but then DJ wakes up from his dream. And again, very, very good movie on a visual front. And animation-wise, I think the animation does hold up 19 years later. This movie came out in 2006, so next year will be the 20th anniversary of this movie. So almost 20 years later, the animation still holds up pretty well. But then, yeah. Anyways, DJ, he's woken up because basically his phone is ringing. And keep in mind, this was made in the 1980s, so it's not like a cell phone. It's one of those phones, those hand dial phones. You know what I'm talking about. But anyways, he gets a call on that end, and DJ notices that the call is coming from Mr. Nebbercracker's house. And keep in mind, Mr. Nebbercracker was rushed to the ER, so this was after that. And then I like the part when he's staring at the house, but then we are introduced to Z's boyfriend Bones, voiced by Jason Lee, who basically wears like a Halloween mask, the one that Chowder was wearing earlier, and then he goes behind DJ and scares him. He's like, "Happy Halloween, doofus!" And then Z and him are laughing. He's like, "Look at that face, that's funny," and stuff like that. And I liked Bones. I thought he was a funny character. He was a bit of a jerk at times, but he was a jerk, but he was a funny jerk. And then so basically the babysitter Z basically, is talking to DJ, the mother's son, and DJ basically says that there's something wrong with that house and stuff like that, and that Mr. Nebbercracker died. And that he got a call from the house, and the guy said, "You lie," and stuff like that. And he's like, "Oh, a call from beyond the grave." And then he scares DJ again, and he's like, "I'm serious." And then he picks up DJ's stuffed animal. He's like, "He's serious. Did you know he was serious?" And he was like, "Come on, give her back, oh her." And then he starts looking at it. He's like, "Oh, come on, gross." And then he was like, "Hold up, I think she has something stuck in her throat. I'll look into it." And then the babysitter's like, "Enough, Bones, stop." He's like, "Sorry, kid, can't play anymore." And then he throws it at him, and then he walks out the room. But then there's a part where DJ's about to sneak out of the house, but while this is going on, the babysitter, Z, and Bones, they do not see that he's out of bed, but he's secretly listening to their conversation. And Z basically says, "I did see Mr. Nebbercracker rush to the hospital today, so what if he did really die?" And we basically get basically Z, which is, and basically Bones, which is Z's boyfriend, says that when I was a kid, I had an awesome kite, and when it was on that lawn, it flew it so high you couldn't see it, and then one day it crashed down in his yard. And then Z is like, "Did he take it?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course he took it. He takes anything that lands on that lawn." But that's besides the point. Besides, Bones says to Z, besides, everyone knows what he did to his wife, and she's like, "What did you?" And then and then I like the part where Bones is like, "He ate her, ah!" and then he tackles her on the couch, and then but then DJ manages to sneak out of the house and stuff like that, and she's like, "You have no respect for women," and then Bones is like, "Oh, come on, I was just joking. Why? What does that mean?" And she was like, "Get out," and stuff like that. And then there's the part where Bones, which is Z's boyfriend, basically is drinking a beer. Well, he chucks it on the lawn, and then he basically sees the door to the house open itself, and then he sees his red kite, which he goes to grab. But then, because the house has powers, the house eats him because basically, and one thing I really like about this movie is the creativity. Like, for example, the house has a lot of abilities. Like, for example, you find out a little later in the movie that the house, it basically has like a super long carpet that kind of looks like a snake's tongue that can come out and like pull a person in. I thought that was pretty cool, and it can also attach these trees to its bodies, which it can use as arms to walk. But again, that's not till later in the movie, but I thought that was a rather cool concept. And then DJ and Chowder are at the house and stuff like that, and basically, and so yeah, Bones was basically eaten. But later that night, Chowder and DJ tells Chowder, "You gotta believe me. The house is alive. It's trying to do this." But Chowder doesn't believe him. So later that night, Chowder, he decides that he's gonna go up to the house to basically prove to DJ that. He says, "You'll see, there's no ghosts and stuff like that." And then I like the part when DJ is crawling on the ground. He picks up Bones' bottle. He's like, "Oh no, a bottle!" And then DJ's like, "Put that down." No, and then DJ's like, "Put that down, Chowder." And then Chowder goes up to the house and stuff like that. But then Chowder basically sees that the house is alive, and the house basically tries to attack him and stuff like that, like these razor sharp teeth, which are really floorboards, come out of the house's mouth, and like the house is really angry, and it has like these arms it's moving and stuff like that, and it's roaring really loud in the neighborhood. And then DJ and Chowder end up running back into the house for safety and stuff like that. And then I like the part when DJ says, "Don't look back," and then Chowder looks back and the house scares him. He's like, "I looked back." And then the next day, the babysitter Z, who is voiced by Maggie Gyllenhaal, basically wakes up and to a doorbell ring and meets a character named Jenny, who is voiced by Spencer Locke, who is a Girl Scout, and she gets some Girl Scouts and stuff like that. And well, she talks to her and appreciates her service. But then there's a part where the girl Jenny is about to deliver Girl Scout cookies to the monster house, and then Chowder and DJ are like, "Oh no," and then they run out of the house, and Z says, "DJ, it's your phone," and then they basically tell Jenny to they tell her to get away from the house, but like she doesn't believe them. She says, "Oh, whatever," but then Chowder says the house is alive, and while this happens, the house, it opens up its mouth, which is the door, and then these razor sharp teeth, which is the floorboards, come out the point of it, and then the girl in Jenny screams, and like basically what the house does is it basically picks up the sidewalk with metal pipes in the air when she's on top of a wagon, and it's slowly reeling her down, and she's about to be eaten, but DJ and Chowder manage to save her. But then Z says, "DJ, it's the phone." But before the babysitter Z can see it, the house basically puts the stuff back in the ground, and then she basically says, "All right, explain what happened." "Okay, the house just tried to eat us." She's like, "Okay, stop explaining." And then she said, "What?" And then I like the part when Z is like, "What is your problem?" He says, "Yes, I'm going through puberty, lots and lots of puberty." And she's like, "All right, no more Mountain Dew." He's like, "Got it." But then Jenny and Chowder and DJ are in DJ's room, and she finds like a Mountain Dew bottle with pee in it, and she was like, "Ew, gross." And then I and then I like the part when Chowder messes with him. He's like, "DJ, you pee in bottles?" He's like, "That's not my pee. It's yours." And she was like, "Okay, wait a minute, guys." And that, but then basically what happens is Jenny says, "Normally I don't spend time with guys like you, but a house just tried to eat me, so I'll stick around for a little bit." But then Jenny, Chowder, and DJ, they're looking through a telescope and they see that the lawn carpet ton comes out the house and it pulls a dog in. And they're like, it just ate a dog and stuff like that. So the kids have a plan to destroy the house. And so the kids decide to call the police. But of course, the police don't believe them. And the two police officers are actually voiced by Kevin James and Nick Cannon. And I rather like those two as actors. So it was nice to see them in this movie. But essentially, they don't believe them. But DJ's like, "You gotta believe us. Watch this. I'll show you." But then DJ's like, he's stomping in the ground, but he's jumping up and down, and the cops are laughing, amused. But then Chowder chucks a rock at the house, and he's like, and the cop, voiced by Kevin James, is like, "Hey, get over here." He says, "I'm willing to forget the rock being thrown at the house, because that dance was pretty funny. But the next time you mess with this guy's house, you're coming down to the station. Got it?" And the kids say yes, but the kids are about to say, are like, "You got to believe us." But the cops say, you have to the count of 10 to do the march. But then Chowder, DJ, and Jenny are walking. But then the cops, basically, one of them accidentally bump with the car. Granted, it's not going fast, but it accidentally bumps Chowder. He's like, "Ow." And then DJ's like, "My house is over there." But then DJ says, "We'll go to an expert." But then we cut to the part where DJ, Chowder, and Jenny, they go to the arcade because there's a guy at the arcade named Renigold Skolinski, or as DJ and Chowder call him, Skull, voiced by John Herder, who's basically playing a video game, and he's in the zone. And Jenny says, "We're going to go talk to him." And then Chowder's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. You do not want to mess with Skull when he's in the zone, when he's in the game zone." And she's like, "Fine. How long is it gonna be?" And then DJ says, "Who knows?" He once went for 4 days, with wearing an adult diaper, and a gallon of chocolate milk, and a candy bar, etc. And she says, "Yeah, well, if he's gonna stay in the game zone, then we're going in." But then Jenny and Chowder and DJ, they're basically talking to him, and Skull was like, "I'm in the game zone." What? But then I like the part when DJ says, "Old man Mr. Nevercracker's house is trying to come to life and eat people." And then I like the part when Skull says, "Oh, you make me want to throw up in some tinfoil and eat it," which I thought that was pretty funny. But then I like the part when Skull was basically talking to DJ, and he says, "First you got to go inside and destroy the heart." And then that's what Skull says, but then DJ says, "And houses don't have hearts." But then Skull cheers because he beat a boss in a game, and then he basically gets a call because he's a pizza man. He says, "Well, sorry kids, I got to get going, and I'll see you later." But then I like the part when Chowder has like a chocolate candy bar in his hand, and then the pizza guy just basically goes up, takes a bite out of it, grabs it out of his hand, and just runs out. I thought that scene was funny. So then Chowder, Jenny, and DJ, they basically assemble a plan where they're basically gonna use drugs. They're basically gonna fill it up. They're basically gonna take a dummy, wrap and strap it down to a vacuum, and put a mask on top of the vacuum handle and fill it up with drugs. That way, so the body structure of it is good as a decoy. That way it can go into the house, and that's basically their plan. But before the kids can do that, the cops show up, and then the cops, voiced by Kevin James and Nick Cannon, basically show up, and Kevin James says, "You kids are going to jail." And then I like the part when Nick Cannon's character, Officer Lister, says, "You hear that? Your kids are going to jail." But then the kids are put in the car. And then I like the part when when Officer Lister, voiced by Nick Cannon, says, "You hear that?" And then Officer Landers, voiced by Kevin James, says, "Yeah, it's my stomach." He's like, "No, no, no, no." He says, "No, no, no, no. It sounds like the creature inside." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'll go take a look." But of course, like I said, the kids are right, and basically the kids are trapped inside of the cop car with it locked, and the kids are basically screaming, "Don't go to the house," and stuff like that. But then there's literally a scene where a tree, which basically serves as the arm of the house, basically grabs the gun out of Officer Lister's hand, and he's basically screaming, and he was like, "That's against the law." And then all the kids are screaming in the car. But then the main officer, Officer Landers, voiced by Kevin James, says, "I'm coming, buddy." And then he says, "I'm calling for backup." And then the officer says, "You said there was no backup. I'm calling Judy," because Judy's the only one at the police station. But then Officer Landers, voiced by Kevin James, yells "Judy" at the top of his lungs, and then the house basically throws the other officer inside his door, aka the house's mouth. But then basically some trees grab out, but then some trees come out, grab the kids in the car, and basically the tree pulls it basically pulls the car with kids inside of the house. But the kids basically see that the glass on the back window is broken enough to the point to where they can climb out of it, so they do, so they don't die. But the house door closes behind them, and the house thinks that they're still in the car when it sucked the car down. But then later in the movie, and sorry if you hear a dog barking in the background, but anyways, getting back to my review. So basically what happens is the kids are stuck inside the house, and the house thinks it ate the kids, and the house thinks that the kids are still in the car, but they're not. But then there's a part where the floorboards open up, which basically the floorboards are the teeth, and the lawn carpet's a ton. And then so Jenny points out that the red glowing light hanging from the ceiling, it must be the uvula. And then I like the part when Chowder says, "Ah, so it's a girl house." And then she's like, "What? No, the uvula is what causes your gag reflex. Everyone has it." And Chowder says, "Not me." Like, I thought that was pretty funny. But then not too long after that, the kids, they basically come across some pictures from the past of a much younger version of Mr. Nebbercracker and his wife Constance, his wife Constance died decades ago. And of course, there's the whole legend of town that Mr. Nebbercracker ate her, but we find out that's not true, which we will get to that. But basically, once Chowder, DJ, and Jenny manage to destroy the uvula and get out of the house, they don't destroy the house right away, but they destroy the uvula. They do get out of the house, but basically what happens is, basically an ambulance, it accidentally bumps into DJ, and DJ's okay and stuff like that, but Mr. Nebbercracker gets out and stuff like that. And then I like the part when when Chowder's like, "It's a ghost." He's like, "I'm not a ghost. Go away," and stuff like that. But then DJ, Chowder, and Jenny, they're basically talking about how this monster house is not good. But then the character who owns the house, Mr. Nebbercracker. But then I like the part when DJ says, "You did not kill her, did you?" But then this is the part of the movie that plays a main factor into it. We basically learned that the character, Mr. Nebbercracker, decades ago, he had a wife by the name of Constance, and he loved his wife so much. But, however, there were a bunch of kids that did not like his wife, and they picked on his wife. And one day, decades ago, there was a terrible tragedy where Constance, which is Mr. Nebbercracker's wife, where there was a part so this is during the backstory where basically Constance, Mr. Nebbercracker's wife, they were basically building a house out of wood, and during the part when we see this flashback, the house is barely done, but a bunch of kids are throwing eggs at Constance, and she says, "You stay away from my house." And then Mr. Nevercracker says, "What's wrong?" And she says, "There's a bunch of these idiots, and they're hurting me." And then Constance is like, and not Constance, Mr. Nevercracker's like, "Calm down, they're just kids." And then he says, "Constance, look at me. As long as I'm here, I will never let anyone hurt you." But then a bunch of kids are throwing eggs at Constance. But then this is where the terrible tragedy comes into play, where the character Constance, she falls backwards, but before she falls, she basically grabs a lever. She falls down into a hole, and a bunch of cement liquid pours on her, basically freezing her inside of it. So, she died, sadly. And then Mr. Nevercracker, when he's given the backstory, says to the kids, "I finished the house. It's what she wanted," and stuff like that. And he said, Constance was missed, but she never left, and stuff like that. But then Mr. Nevercracker gives the backstory, and on every Halloween night that year, I had to take precautions. I had to. And then he would basically yell at everyone, "Stay off my lawn." So yeah, that's basically why he acts the way he does. But then he basically tells the kids to go. And then I like the part when DJ says to him, "Look, I understand how important Constance was to you, Mr. Nevercracker, but you gotta let her go." But then Mr. Nevercracker says, "But if I let her go, I'll have no one." And then DJ says, "That's not true." But then he basically holds his hand. And now this is the big moment we've all been waiting for. The giant house comes to life, where basically what happens is teeth come out of the house. Its eyes are mad. The eyes, which are the windows, are cracked and mad. And there are two giant trees that attach themselves to the house, and the trees are basically what makes the house be able to walk. And the house and during the last 20 minutes of the movie, the house has officially come to life. It's walking throughout the neighborhood. It's destroying. It knocks over an electric pole. DJ and them is running, and of course there's the part of the movie where Mr. Nevercracker says to the house, "I've always been a good. You've always been a." He says, "I've always been there for you, haven't I? I've always done the right thing, what's right for you, haven't I? Haven't I, girl?" But then there's the part where Mr. Nevercracker says, "There, sweetie, you've been a bad girl, haven't you? You hurt people." And the house looks sad, and he says, "I gotta make things right." And then there's the whole part where Mr. Nevercracker, he's about to light a dynamite stick to throw into the house, but the house's hand basically grabs him. But before it can do anything, Chowder comes to the rescue with like a giant crane, basically with a bulldozer lift, and basically smashes it into the house. But and it gets into a big fight where Chowder is doing good, and then there's the whole part where the house. And then of course there's the whole part where the house, it falls into a construction site, but it destroys into millions of pieces, and we think that the house is finally destroyed. But the house basically comes back together, only this time it doesn't look like a house at all. It just looks like a bunch of scrap thrown together, but the house is still active and stuff like that, and it does manage to destroy the vehicle Chowder's using to trying to destroy it. And while this is going on, DJ and Jenny are basically climbing the ladder of like a really tall, kind of like a skyscraper lift. I guess that's the best way to describe it, but it's not really that. But they basically climb up it, and DJ decides to make the brave move where he basically takes a stick of dynamite, he throws it in the chimney of the house. Him and Chowder get down, and the house basically explodes in one epic explosion. And then so yeah, the house is destroyed. And then the movie ends on a good note where Mr. Nevercracker basically sees the spirit ghost of his wife Constance, and then he's basically crying, and then DJ says to him, "I'm sorry about your housewife," and then the old man, Mr. Nevercracker, says 45 years. we've been trapped for 45 years, and now we're free. And then he's basically cheering at the top of his lungs saying, thank you so much, mister. And then at the end of the movie, all the toys that the house took throughout all the years, Mr. Nevercracker, he does the right thing. He gives them back to the kids. And then at the end of the movie, DJ and Chowder, they decide to go trick-or-treating. And at the end of the movie, we see that Bones survived, and he comes out of the hole where the house used to be. And so do the two police officers. So yeah, at the end of the day, this is a really good movie. Easily my favorite of the animated Halloween movies, and on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give Monster House a 9 out of 10. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching my review, and next up, I will be reviewing the 1983 Stephen King movie adaptation, Christine, directed by John Carpenter, and then after that, I will do a rant on the, well, granted, I've not seen the movie, so I can't say it's bad, but I have heard bad things about it. I will attempt to watch Skinamarink, which I've heard awful things about that movie. Honestly, that'll probably be the next movie review since it's free on Tubi, and I just want to get a bad movie out the way, and then we'll get back to reviewing some good stuff. But we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.